What is up, guys? In today's video, I'm going to be going over how you can find your perfect settings and sensitivity in Fortnite. As always, if you guys do enjoy this video, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you like to see more, and comment down below if you feel, comfortable with your settings or if you think there's things that you need to change. The first thing that we're going to talk about is there is no perfect sensitivity that works for everyone. And I'm sure many of you looking at the title are like, what the heck? That's what the title was. But what I mean by that is your settings and what's perfect for you might be different than what's ideal for somebody else. And so like what feels good to me personally might feel terrible to a different player, and what works best for them might feel terrible to me. It's about your own preference and finding what feels comfortable to you. You shouldn't feel pressured to feel like you have to use somebody's sensitivity or settings just because they're a good player or even better than you. And this is something that I see a lot of in the Fortnite community. Like Fortnite, more so than any game I've ever seen, players have like an obsession or fixation with settings, and thinking that like suddenly if they just copy somebody's settings, they're going to be as good as that person. And that is very unlikely to be the case. It's not somebody's settings that just make them good. And if you just copy someone's settings, you're probably not going to feel great on them, and you're probably not going to play your best on them. If you are going to change your settings, you should go into this process being content with things feeling bad for a bit, not feeling that comfortable, and the fact that you'll likely play worse for a little bit. It's probably not just going to be an instant like finger snap and then, you feel comfortable with these new settings. It takes time. This is going to be like taking a step backwards to take several forward in the long run. And this applies to sensitivity and settings. We're mostly going to talk about sensitivity, but there's other settings that you might want to change. And if you're wondering why you might want to change your settings, it just so happens that the default settings are not the best and likely not the perfect match for you. I've played a lot of shooters over the years. It's very uncommon for very good players to be playing on default sense. And I know I kind of said that the settings don't make the player, but like if a lot of players are deviating from that and playing better, it's just typically the case that default sense and default settings aren't the greatest. They're just like a decent starting point, Also, settings like slide hold time or dead zone on controller, the default is like quite bad, so adjusting this is like pretty important. A lot of players play on like a really low sensitivity early on because they're uncomfortable with the game, and maybe even uncomfortable with the input method if Fortnite is one of the first games they played. And playing on that very low sensitivity is easier to get used to, but this can make it harder to deal with players who like use movement well and use movement items. And if you guys have played Chapter 6, there's a lot of movement in the game. I often get comments like, how do you track people gliding on island? They're moving too quick for me. Or how do you shoot people that are shockwaving? They're too fast. Or how do you keep up with people using the sword? A lot of that could just come down to the fact that like the default settings make it too slow to kind of do those things. So changing your settings up allows you to have more control over, your settings and how you're going to play. And so I would recommend changing them if it is something you want to do. If you've already changed them before and you feel comfortable, that's great. But if you feel like there's room for improvement there and you've never really messed with it, I think that changing it is a good idea. You may want to kind of like write down or take a picture with your phone of your current settings, like what your sensitivity is now if you're going to change it. That way, if you do, hate this process in a few days, you can just go back to what was working. So make note of your old settings if you haven't already, whether that's writing it down, taking a picture, whatever. And I do think copying a streamer's or content creator's settings can be a decent starting point. And that might seem counteractive to what I said at the start of the video, but I was trying to stress that you copying someone's settings and then thinking you're going to play as good as them and thinking you have to play on those settings is not ideal. But if you want to use those settings as like a starting off point, I think that is, something that makes sense. The difference is whether or not you're willing to deviate from it. If you try it out and it's not good and you switch it up, that's fine. But if you're, hard stuck on using it because X player does, so you have to, I don't think that is a good mindset. My settings video will be linked down in the description below if you want to check that out. But any player, whose settings you like, you can copy as a starting out point. They're probably decent settings and close to being good. And this is likely a better starting off point than just putting it to the lowest possible thing or the highest possible thing and then going from there. There's kind of like a ballpark of what most people feel comfortable with. And if somebody is a very good player, they're probably somewhere within that like range, If you are a controller player, though, you need to take into account whether or not the person plays exponential or linear, and then also what you're going to play. So if you're a linear player and you copy an expo player sensitivity, the linear expo setting changes how that feels. So somebody's sense on linear wouldn't feel the same on expo and vice versa. So if you want to play expo, copy an expo player settings. If you want to play linear, copy a linear player settings. It's just how the sensitivity reacts over time. If you've never changed it, you're on expo. That's the default. And either one is fine. There's very good controller players on both. It's not really cut and dry that one's better than the other. And then also potentially the platform they play on. If you're playing controller on PC, the game feels differently because like the frame rate changes how your sensitivity feels kind of. And then also console has stronger aim assist. So if you're a PS5 player, it might be best for you to look for a PS5 player settings, Xbox, PC. That isn't required, but like the match is going to feel probably better, to start with. And even then, you can copy these settings. Like I said, it's a decent starting point. You're probably going to need to make some adjustment. Do not feel forced to stay on here and never change it. It's a good starting point. If things feel perfect right off the bat, that's awesome, but you'll likely need to make some adjustment. I do think it's best to give it some time though, because it will take some time to, warm up and judge things. If you change it, move your character around for 10 seconds and then like, wow, this feels crap. And then just keep doing that, you'll probably never feel comfortable. If it feels, absolutely terrible, then maybe you need to make some changes. But if it feels like, 6 or a 7 out of 10, but not great yet, still just play around with it and then go from there. Give yourself some time to warm up with it. Unless things are drastic, then you need to, make some immediate changes. But if it feels okay-ish, but not great, give it some time, play, see how it goes, and then make adjustments over time once you've kind of warmed up to it a bit. Whether that's turning it up a bit or turning your sensitivity down a bit, it really just kind of comes down to how you're playing. If if you play for 5 to 10 minutes, a few matches, whatever, and it feels too fast still, then maybe turn it down a bit. Or, vice versa. If you play a few matches and it still feels too slow, then maybe turn it up a bit. But if you're just constantly changing things, you're probably never going to feel comfortable. That's why I was saying kind of give it some time before you make an adjustment, unless it's just a horrible, initial reaction. And this is also kind of why I said at the start of the video that you should go into this process with the mindset that you're taking a few steps back to take more forward in the long run. Because if you're, overly concerned about playing bad or, getting upset because of that, then you're probably going to keep making adjustments more than you need to. And it's going to be, longer for you to end up feeling comfortable because you're constantly changing things if you're constantly upset that you're losing, And then creative is also going to be a much better place to practice and get used to new settings than playing regular BR would, mainly just because of the amount of time you can get in fights. If you're playing BR, you have to worry about landing, looting, finding people. Maybe you don't find people for a while. Maybe you, land at a house, don't get a gun, die off spawn. Now you're sitting in the lobby again. There's just not a lot of time efficiency in Battle Royale. And the punishment for losing is greater because there's more waiting time. Whereas if you play creative, you can get in fights incredibly fast, get a lot of repetition fighting, build that comfort with your sensitivity, and then also kind of see how you need to make adjustments. You can get in 10 fights in less than 5 minutes and then see, okay, yeah, I'm overshooting this every time. Maybe I need to turn it down, or I feel like I don't have much control. I feel like I need to turn it down, or I feel too slow. I feel like I need to turn it up. Like you can get experience and then make informed adjustments rather than just like dying in BR and blaming the settings. That's kind of what you want to avoid. And that's why creative is better, I think, because I feel like people get less upset as a result of losing a creative match. And then also, like I said, from a time efficiency standpoint, it's really good for that as well. So you're going to, get more experience faster and then get adjusted to it faster. So that would be my advice for finding settings. Copy someone's sensitivity that, plays similar to what you want to play, but go into it willing to adjust those settings, play creative, and kind of fine tune it over time to your liking. And then after, a day or two, you'll probably start to feel very good. But I feel like even within a day or a few hours, you could start to feel better. I'm someone who doesn't change my sensitivity very much, but in the past when I have, it didn't take days before I started to feel better. It's like after, a few hours, it's like, okay, I do see how this is better. And then over time, you just get more and more adjusted. So I think this process is quite simple, but the main mistakes a lot of people make are kind of having real high expectations about copying someone's sensitivity and then not wanting to change that even when it's not working. And then also, like I said, kind of getting upset based on the outcome of the game and then constantly adjusting settings. So they're just kind of constantly in a limbo of not feeling good. But that is going to be it for this video. My settings will be linked down in the description below. Some 0 build creative maps that I think are good for fighting will also be in the description down below. If you enjoyed this, give it a like, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.